So is it possible to stop or even slow down the rate of mass extinctions? And what kind of damage are they doing to biodiversity? And what does that mean to us as a human species? Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. On the line with us is Nele Marien, Forestry and Biodiversity Framework Coordinator with Friends of the Earth International, FOEI, as in Friends of Earth International.org is their website. And Nele's Twitter handle is NeleMarien. Nele, welcome to the program.
Hi, hello. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. Let's talk about mass extinctions here. Mass extinctions not only weaken frankly, the web of life, they also endanger humans. What is the state of mass extinction? You know, we all saw Elizabeth Colbert's book a couple of years ago. You know, the sixth extinction, and it seems to be a consensus that we are in the sixth extinction. How fast is it moving? What is being done, and what can and should be done?
Yeah, I have bad news for you all, because we are indeed in the sixth mass extinction, and the previous one being the dinosaurs. So it's not an event that happens quick time around. And normally, you know, biodiversity is something that keeps on moving. Species appear and species disappear. But we are currently losing species at a rate of thousands times quicker than would naturally occur. So that is all but normal. And of course, the reason for this happening is human activity. But of course, it's not just human activity. Basically, it's our economy, the big sector, the corporations who are effectively constantly destroying biodiversity, the ecosystems, genetic diversity. All of these things are being destroyed at such a big rate that we actually are in the risk of a complete collapse about that.
So what are the specific actions that big corporations are taking in the United States and around the world that are endangering biodiversity, that are stripping the genetic diversity out of our food crops, and then in addition to that, you know, biodiversity more broadly out of our our external ecosystems?
Yeah, I mean, kind of all actions. You already mentioned agriculture is one of the big ones, and for many reasons. One of them is deforestation and just changing all kinds of valuable ecosystems into monocrop land, which is hugely devastating, of course, for these previously valuable ecosystems. The other thing, and you also already mentioned in your question, is that normally even agriculture has a lot of biodiversity in it. Farmers used to have for thousands of years so many different plants, etc., and they used to interact with the insects and the birds and everything. All the biodiversity would be on the cropland as well. But nowadays we're having monoculture crop plantations, furthermore heavily sprayed by pesticides, which will not leave any other kind of diversity living on a cropland. So that effectively also kills biodiversity, not only on the cropland itself, but of course it has an impact further ahead of where the croplands are. So agriculture, especially industrial agriculture, is one of the main culprits of biodiversity loss. And well, as Friends of the Earth, we always state that agroecology will really be an answer, because, as I mentioned before, when you do agriculture in a way which really is taking into account all the different types of products and all the different varieties of agriculture that can be done, you can actually enhance biodiversity, and it's also good for the climate. So that's one of the first one, agriculture. But of course, all different kind of sectors come to mind as well. For example, if you have mining, and especially if we're talking about the big kinds of mining, the mountaintop removal, that is effectively destroying a whole ecosystem at a time. We can talk about fossil fuel extractions. We can talk about infrastructure. The amount of infrastructure which is being planned for the next 10, 20, 30 years is actually so big that that in itself can destroy the biodiversity and the ecosystems of the world. And I'm sure I'm forgetting about several sectors, but I mean, we can come back to it.
Yeah, I get it. We're talking with Nele Marien, who is the Forestry and Biodiversity Framework Coordinator for the Friends of Earth International. FOEI.org is the website. What can individual persons do? I know as a consumer, my wife Louise and I, for I'd say probably all of our married life, we were vegetarians when we met back in the 60s. We've always tried to eat organic food. One of the things that I've noticed when we go into food co-ops, organic food stores, or farmers markets where there's a lot of organic food is that there's an extraordinary diversity, lots of different kinds of breeds of tomatoes and pears and apples and peppers and fill in the blanks. Whereas when you go to the supermarket and you're just looking at those food categories, you typically only see one or two species, those that are easily grown with lots of pesticides and in crappy soil, and those that will preserve well while they're shipped from one state to another. It seems obvious that trying to buy organic food and buy locally is something that helps biodiversity at the agriculture level. Are there other things that individual consumers can do to help promote biodiversity? And what are the political levers? Where are the pressure points where we can encourage our politicians to do things that will stop harming biodiversity and start promoting biodiversity?
That's many questions at a time.
Sorry.
But first, that's totally all right. At a personal level, as a consumer, what you have been stating, it's completely right, and it relates back to what I was saying about the agricultural biodiversity. You are right. There's just so many different kinds of species of tomatoes and pears, etc. And consuming these makes us. We also strengthen the farmers, the family farmers, the small-scale farmers who use who use biological, organic ways of farming, and this is really enhancing biodiversity. So that is completely correct. And then, of course, consuming local products is always correct. So very fair and very good what you're doing there, and I would advise people to do that. But indeed, just at a consumer level only, we will not be able to change the system. We need to change the economic types of systems, and we need to change the powers which are behind this in order to be able to save biodiversity. And if it has to depend on individual consumers only, who quite often are not given the choice also. If everybody would decide tomorrow after hearing this interview, like, oh, I'll go to the shop and I'll buy only organic, then there is not sufficient organic food. So we have a systemic problem here. So therefore, we need systemic answers. And these systemic answers, they need to come from policymakers. So what we need to do is really make sure that these corporate actors who are causing, be it in the industrial agriculture sector and who are land grabbing, making huge scale agriculture, selling it on wholesale markets across the world with lots of speculation and with also high prices in supermarkets, making it inaccessible for people. These kind of things have to change, and we have to make sure that we get policies that actually get us back to local community where people know each other and where we can have trade just at a local level so that people can help each other. The same goes for other kind of corporations. I mean, of course, we will need certain amount of resources, but the amount of extraction of resources we're seeing currently in the world is completely unsustainable. And honestly speaking, most of it is for crap we actually don't need. We can be so much happier if we live together in smaller communities. And I mean, that doesn't mean we can't ever travel or something, and it doesn't mean we have to go back to the cave times. Not at all. But just taking away the power of these corporations who are actually extracting and trading us stuff that we don't need, having programmed obsolescence, by which I mean that they actually make products in such a way that they get destroyed very quickly, so we are forced to buy something new. These kind of things, they need to change through policies that actually force business to do the right thing.
And that means political action. That means getting politically involved. I would add just finally, my understanding is that if you eat a diverse spectrum of species in your food, you also get a diverse spectrum of micronutrients, so that it's a very healthy thing. And Nele Marien, the Forestry and Biodiversity Framework Coordinator with Friends of the Earth International, thanks so much for being with us today.